Hello everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah for Latter-day Saints. Today we are going to be doing Isaiah chapter 49, and this is 1 Nephi 21. This chapter is kind of interesting. There's some significant differences here, and there's actually, every now and then, in the Book of Mormon and in the JST, we'll find things where the differences between the Book of Mormon and the King James Version fit the traditional differences that you would expect because of things that we know happened because of ancient scribes copying things down. Things that all textual scholars know happen with textual variants. So we've got one of these today in here, so that's going to be interesting. Isaiah 49, it's nice that we have this in the Book of Mormon. This is some more of what we get in 1 Nephi, Nephi saying, listen guys, I know things are bad right now, but God's going to help you guys. So he's taking these scriptures and applying it to their own time, which he himself says that he's doing. He's saying, I'm taking these scriptures and likening them unto us. And so, but these are some beautiful, beautiful verses, and they really give a lot of comfort, honestly. And it's great that we have these things preserved in the Book of Mormon so that we can get what may well be a much better version, actually, than we get in the Hebrew Bible. There is one difference here. There's a textual variant in the Book of Mormon. So I'm using Royal Skousen's book, published through Yale University Press, Book of Mormon, the earliest text. I've talked about that before. So I'm using that book. I'm also using another book that is pretty helpful and interesting. It's a book called Opening Isaiah, a Harmony. I worked on this book actually for quite a number of years with Ann Madsen and Sean Hopkin. It's a very, very excellent book, really, and definitely worth your time. And I'm going to be using it today because it gives you all of the differences between all the manuscripts side by side. Well, not all of them. It gives you the King James, JST, Book of Mormon, Dead Sea Scrolls, and the NRSV. So it's very, very helpful. It doesn't give you the Septuagint, so this YouTube channel has given you the Septuagint part, which is very helpful. But this gives you a lot of the other stuff. So definitely worth your time, and a nice way to be able to sit there and really compare the versions and really think about it a little bit more. Because I have not gone through everything exhaustively. I've tried to give you the major textual variants, and I've done a lot of that stuff, but this stuff will give you a lot of these other things. And the NRSV is sometimes just nice to help you to just understand things. It's actually a pretty good translation. We sometimes have this idea that the King James translation is the best translation ever, but there's not really any such thing as the best translation. There are best translations for certain things, right? The King James is really, really good if you can't read Hebrew. Well, in some ways you kind of need the Hebrew. In some ways, though, it's good that you can't when you can't read Hebrew, but you still want to pick up on the subtle nuances and puns and stuff in the text, because it will preserve words for you, almost word for word. It's a very, very literal translation. The trouble is you don't get any of the idioms. So when you read the King James, you're getting the word for word, but you're not getting the idioms. Whereas in the NRSV, you're not getting the word for word, so you're going to miss some of the puns, but you're going to get the idioms. So you need lots of different translations. If you don't speak Hebrew, you need lots of different translations for lots of different things. And honestly, even though I do read Hebrew, I like to consult various translations because I may not have picked up on a certain what a certain idiom might mean, and things like that, where they will have done some of the heavy lifting to figure out what some of the idioms mean. Sometimes I'll look at it in Hebrew and go, what is that phrase supposed to mean? And some of these translations will have these things in it where they say, oh, well, it's like this, and then they'll even put something in the note saying, hey, we found this in some text from Ugard or something like that, and this is what this idiom is about. So that is a really nice thing to have. And so we sometimes are skittish about using other translations because King James translation is our translation. We sort of own that in the church. That's the one that we use. It's the one that the Book of Mormon uses. It's the one that the Doctrine and Covenants quotes from. And so we sort of have a sense of ownership over that, and that's fair enough. But we have to realize that there's other things here. There's other things going on. It's not as though the King James is just the absolute most pristine, best translation ever. It's the best for certain things. And I think we have this idea that the other translations are sort of this sort of nefarious attempt to undermine the text. That's not really true. It's just the different translations are different because they're trying to do different things for different reasons. And that's okay. That really is okay. President Nelson has actually gone back to the original Greek sometimes, even in General Conference, in favor of the King James. Elder Holland very routinely quotes other translations besides the King James. When you actually look at the footnotes of his conference addresses, he does that. It's very clear he's doing that. So we can't be too nervous about looking at other translations. So anyway, if you want this book, this is an excellent book, Opening Isaiah, A Harmony, by Ann Matson and Sean Hopkin. I was a research assistant for Ann for many years on this project, and it's just a delightful little book, and I'll be using it today, along with Royal Skousen's earliest text, the Book of Mormon, the earliest text from Yale University. I really enjoy both of these. If you want a free copy of Skousen's book, it's on the Book of Mormon Central website. There's a website called bookofmormoncentral.org, and it'll have some of that stuff on there, Royal Skousen stuff. So it's a nice place to go for that. But anyway, let's jump in here to Isaiah 49, and we'll get to some pretty fun stuff here. I'm looking at it in 1 Nephi 21, and I'll consult back to Isaiah 49 periodically. I think when we have the Book of Mormon version, we have to use it, I think. I think it's a superior version. It's because it's much older, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls are comparatively very late. This is roughly 600 BC, right? This is in the 580s BC that Nephi's recording this, somewhere in the 580s, maybe 570s, and that's pretty good. The Dead Sea Scrolls are much later and not as useful to us, even though they are still useful. This is going to be much older, so we're going to start here and compare with the others as we go along. So 1 Nephi 21 says, "And again, hearken, O ye house of Israel, all ye that are broken off and are driven out because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people. May all ye that are broken off, that are scattered abroad, who are of my people, O house of Israel, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. The Lord hath called me from the womb, and from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. He hath made my mouth like a sharp sword, in the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft, in his quiver hath he hid me. And said unto me, Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Then I said, I have labored in vain, I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God. And now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb, that I should be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. And he said, It is a light thing, that thou shouldst be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth." Now, what's going on here? In the Old Testament, we actually don't have this whole first half of verse 1. It says, "And again, hearken, O ye house of Israel, all ye that are broken off and driven out because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people. Yea, all ye that are broken off, that are scattered abroad, who are of my people, O house of Israel." Now, "and again" is probably a pause in the narrative. It's probably Nephi saying, okay, we're going to pause here and say, and also Isaiah says this. So he says, "and again," and then he starts reading Isaiah 49. But that whole section, he says, hearken, and there's that whole section, and then it says, "Listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far." That whole first section is gone, and then we have the word "listen." So probably what has happened is In textual criticism, we call this a parablepsis occasioned by a homeoteleuton. Say that one more time. A parablepsis occasioned by a homeoteleuton. That means your eye skipped, parablepsis, because of a word that was the same in the manuscript, homeoteleuton. So you can throw that around at parties to impress your friends now. But the word hearken here is probably the same. It probably is the same as the word listen, being translated different, but it may well in Hebrew have been the same word. Those are close enough together. You could translate those as hearken and listen, translate those from the same word. So it's very likely the scribe looked at hearken, he looked up, he looked down again, and accidentally his eyes skipped over that line and jumped down to the next occurrence of the word hearken, and where he kept going. And so he was copying the manuscript, but he just completely jumped over that line. And we know that this happens pretty often, but that's probably what happened here. So originally it would have said, "Hearken, O ye house of Israel, all you that are broken off and driven out because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people." And this makes sense because this is the context. He's been talking to people that have been scattered by the Assyrians. The Assyrians have come in, they've deported all these people. He says they're broken off from the main branch of the people of Judah that are left, and they're driven out. They've been pushed out and scattered to other places because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people. Pastors here, we don't have the original here, unfortunately, because like I said, this did not make it into the Hebrew that we have, but pastors is probably something like leaders. So the wickedness of the leaders of my people. When you compare it with other times where pastor appears in the King James, it's probably something like that, or words like this appear in the King James. This is probably something like leaders of my people, and this is true. The leaders of the people have sort of led them astray to a great extent, and they have been, everyone has sort of taken a hit here because of the wickedness of the leaders of the people. And like I've said before, Hezekiah eventually shapes up, but it takes everything sort of hanging over his head for him to sort of do that, apparently. And still the leadership, overall leadership, may not have been great, and there's evidence for that. And so he's saying, this has happened, the Assyrian conquest has happened because of the wickedness of the leaders of my people. He says, "Yea, all you that are broken off and scattered abroad, broken off from the main branch of Judah or Israel and scattered abroad across the world, who are of my people, O house of Israel." And then he says, "Listen, O isles, unto me." So he's not talking here to Gentiles. He's saying, listen, you guys, in all you countries out there, listen to me. I'm the one who am talking to you, house of Israel, who are scattered abroad here. And what's interesting about this is that you wonder, okay, in the Book of Mormon, why does this get referenced? Well, listen, O isles, unto me. It's almost too good, right? Almost too good not to quote this, because they are on what they consider to be an isle of the sea, right? And they mention this in the Book of Mormon. So as Nephi's reading this is just sort of too perfect, right? But these people have been scattered lots of different places all over the ancient Near East, including even into the Mediterranean and other places. So listen, O isles, unto me is very fitting. And hearken, ye people from far. It says, listen, all you people from far away, that have been scattered out everywhere. The Lord hath called me from the womb. From the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. So who is this? Right? That's the question that we have to ask now. From the bowels of my mother he made mention of my name. Who's he talking about here? And I think we have tried to level this out and make this really flat. Not sure we can actually do that. I think right here we're talking about Isaiah, actually. So, because it's used in the first person, I don't think we have any reason to think that this is not Isaiah. So he says, the Lord hath called me from the womb. From the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. So he's saying, listen, isles, unto me. Hearken, ye people from far. Everyone listen to me. The Lord has called me from the womb. From the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. God has known that I was going to do this from the beginning. And so he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me. He said, my words have been like a sword. And that actually really does work. You read Isaiah's early stuff. That fits. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft. He has, in other words, protected me in his hand, as one might keep a sword protected before you actually go out and use it. Has made me a polished shaft. In his quiver hath he hid me. This is a parallelism. A polished shaft here is an arrow that's well polished. He's hidden the quiver before it's time to come out. In other words, you can see protection here, but you can also see reserved for a later time. He's hidden this thing, Isaiah, to really come out and do this later and do things that you wouldn't expect. And that actually works quite well with what he's about to say. It says, and said unto me, and God has said to Isaiah, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. So he's told Isaiah that Israel is his servant and that he's going to be glorified in Israel. And Isaiah says, what? That's not what this looks like right now to me. Then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Surely my judgment is with the Lord and my work with my God. He says, I have labored in vain. Right? He says, really? All my work has been for nothing. Judah has been totally flattened. I've spent my strength for nothing, it seems like to me. He says, surely my judgment is with the Lord. What does that mean? Surely my judgment. You could translate that, my cause is with the Lord and my reward is with my God. Something like that. And that actually makes some sense, that he's saying, listen, I've done all this for you. I feel like I've done this for nothing, but I have done this for you. My cause is with the Lord, and so my reward is with my God, even though it doesn't seem like anything has worked out. And then the Lord responds to him and says, and now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb, that I should be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. And that's exactly what he did. I don't think we're talking physically here. God called Isaiah to bring Jacob back around to righteousness. And that's what he spends his whole time doing, trying to bring them back around to the Lord. As though Israel be not gathered. God says, it's okay, I know they've been scattered by the Assyrians, and I know that they haven't been gathered yet, but I'm going to be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. God's telling him, you are good enough for me. And he says, my God shall be my strength. And he says, God is going to help me and protect me. And he said, it is a light thing. So God's saying to him, it's a light thing that thou shouldst be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. He says, this is actually a very small thing for you to be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the preserved of Israel, to bring everybody back to where they started from, to gather everyone back in, to bring them back to Judah. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles. So this is actually a small thing. Bring everybody back to Judah is not a big deal. We're going to do something much bigger here. Now, I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation to the ends of the earth. Now, this I think is applying to Isaiah, but Simeon is going to apply this to Jesus. You remember this story? This is Luke. Jesus goes to the temple. This guy Simeon is always hanging out at the temple, waiting to see the Messiah, sees Jesus, and then says Jesus is going to be a light to the Gentiles. And, of course, this applies to Jesus. He's going to be his salvation to the ends of the earth. He's the one that is going through Jesus. It's the Gentiles that are going to get redeemed through Jesus. But does this apply to Isaiah? Sure. He says, I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation. That word salvation is probably a pun on the name Isaiah, which means salvation. Thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. They're saying, Isaiah, what you're saying is going to be a light to the Gentiles. People are going to come to Israel and Judah because of what you're saying. So people are going to come from all over. They're going to listen to what you're saying, and they're going to come into the church. Now, this is come into Judah, in other words, and worship Jehovah. What's great about this is that does this happen? Sure. But it doesn't happen in his lifetime. It's going to be Isaiah that the early Christians are going to use to bring people into the church. So God is comforting Isaiah by saying, listen, you are going to do all these great things, and the Gentiles are going to come in to worship Jehovah because of you. What God isn't telling him is that it's not going to happen in his lifetime. Thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, his Holy One, to him whom man despiseth, to him whom the nations abhorreth, to servant of rulers, kings shall see and arise. Princes also shall worship because of the Lord that is faithful. Now, what is this part? We have a break because it says, thus saith the Lord. So we may be getting a slight break in thought where he's talking to somebody else now. And that seems to be borne out. Like I said, we've tried to tie this together like it's one thing to one person, and that has given us problems. So he says, thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel. Redeemer is very appropriate because there are all these people in slavery. Redeemers are people that buy people out of slavery. His Holy One, to him whom man despiseth. Who is this? I think this could well be talking about King Hezekiah. So, because like I said, there's a break. We have, thus saith the Lord. So there's a break here, I think. And so he's saying, he's been talking to Isaiah, now he's talking to Hezekiah. To him whom man despiseth. Everyone has despised King Hezekiah. He looks like he is just totally lost. He's lost almost all his kingdom. To him whom the nations abhorreth. Yeah, the nations, the Assyrians, the Gentiles, have come in and they totally hate him. They totally hate Hezekiah, and they almost wiped him out. To servant of rulers. Right now, Hezekiah is the servant of the king of Assyria, basically. Not quite, but pretty much. He's pretty close. Tribute has been paid. Kings shall see and arise. Princes also shall worship because of the Lord that is faithful. Saying, right now things are really bad for you guys, but someday kings will worship the Lord. Princes will rise up, and they will worship the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, in an acceptable time have I heard thee. What does that mean, acceptable time? This is probably supposed to be something, I wouldn't maybe say acceptable, more like in a time of favor. This is a parallelism. Thus saith the Lord, in a time of favor have I heard thee, O isles of the sea. In a day of salvation have I helped thee. Is a parallelism. And I will preserve thee. So he's saying, I have heard you, I have helped you, and I will continue to preserve you. And I will give you my servant for a covenant of the people. Presumably, once again, Hezekiah, for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages. Once again, we get this idea of the king and covenant that we got earlier. There is this idea that there is this covenant that the king is going to not be destroyed until he's totally blown it. And they will totally blow it eventually, and that'll be a different situation. But there's this covenant with the king, that he's going to be around and he's going to fix things. And so he's saying, I'm giving thee my servant Hezekiah for a covenant of the people, reminding them of this covenant with the people, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit it, the desolate heritage. Hezekiah is going to help everyone to rebuild. And so let's read some of this part here. So it says, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, go forth. To them that sit in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed in the ways, and their pastures shall be in all high places. They shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them, even by the springs of water shall he guide them. And I will make all my mountains a way, and my highways shall be exalted. And then, O house of Israel, these shall come from far. And lo, these from the north and from the west, these from the land of Sinim. Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those that are in the east shall be established. And break forth into singing, O mountains, for they shall be smitten no more. For the Lord hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. So Hezekiah is going to get all these places rebuilt. These places that have been destroyed by the Assyrians, he's going to rebuild them. That thou mayest say to the prisoners, go forth. You prisoners, come back from captivity out there. The Assyrians have exiled you out there. Come back. To those that are sitting in darkness in prison, show yourselves. Come back. That in darkness can mean literally darkness in the darkness of a prison, but also darkness as in people don't know where they are. So he says, okay, you that are kind of hiding out there, it's okay, show yourselves, come back. They shall feed in the ways. They'll be able to eat as they're walking along the road. Their pasture shall be in all high places. This idea of almost like sheep being brought back. And once again, if the first part of this chapter is original, then that makes sense because he's been talking about that at the beginning. So this ties in with the idea of pastors. That their pastors is related to the word for shepherding. And so this ties into that early part of the chapter. So their pastures shall be in all high places. So these people are coming back almost as like sheep coming back from being lost. They shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor the sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them, even by the springs of water shall he guide them. This is like Psalm 23. There's this imagery of a shepherd guiding the sheep back home. They're not going to be hungry or thirsty. They're not going to be blasted by the sun. God's going to bring them back like a shepherd brings back lost sheep. And I will make all my mountains a way, and my highways shall be exalted. He's going to turn all this terrible terrain into a road. And we've gotten this in 35 and 40. He's going to turn this terrible terrain into a road for people to come back. And then, O house of Israel, behold, these shall come from far. All of these people are going to come from far places, from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Now that word Sinim is a little bit weird, but the word Sinim is, at least in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is rendered Sine. So, but really the idea is it's in the way down south somewhere. This is the Aswan, near Aswan in southern Egypt. So we have the north, the west, and the land of Sinim from the south. Now what's interesting is, in the Book of Mormon, we have a textual variant here that helps to make sense of all of this, because it's a little bit strange otherwise. In the Book of Mormon, it says, from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim, so probably Aswan, which is in southern Egypt, so from the south. But then we don't have anything about the east. It's just those from the land of Sinim. And we don't have anything coming from the east. And that's kind of weird. It's, where's the east? Well, in the Book of Mormon, the east is included. So then in verse 13 of the Book of Mormon, it says, Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those that are in the east shall be established. So there's clearly that part of the Book of Mormon is supposed to be original, because we were missing east before, and now we have east again. So sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those who are in the east shall be established. And break forth into singing, O mountains, for they shall be smitten no more, for the Lord hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. So people will come from the north and the west and from the south. So he says, Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those in the east that have been exiled out there to the east will be established. Because these Assyrians have exported a lot of people out to the east to Babylon. And break forth into singing, O mountains, for they shall be smitten no more. The mountains presumably of Judah, because remember Judah is mountainous. For they shall be smitten no more. In other words, Judah is not going to be attacked anymore. Judah is going to be protected for a long time. For the Lord hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. He's comforted these people that have had all these problems. And that's a beautiful image. And then we get this. But behold, Zion hath said, The Lord hath forsaken me. My Lord hath forgotten me. But he will show them that he hath not. For can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? They may forget, yet will I not forget thee, O house of Israel. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me. Thy children shall make haste against thy destroyers, and they that make thee way shall go forth of thee. Lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together, and they shall come to thee. And as I live, saith the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all as with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride. For thy wastes and thy desolate places and the land of thy destruction shall be even too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallow thee up shall be far away. The children whom thou shalt have after thou hast lost the first shall again in thine ears say, The place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. So this here is a beautiful passage. He's saying, I am going to help you. You guys are not going to be smitten anymore. The Lord has comforted his people. But Zion doesn't think that. Right now, they just think, Yahweh's forsaken me. And we've talked about this before. When the Assyrians fight Yahweh to a standstill, the logic for some people is Yahweh lost. And maybe he didn't lose because he was weak, but maybe he lost because he didn't care anymore. Maybe he just abandoned us. Maybe he abandoned Jerusalem. But behold, Zion, or Jerusalem, has said, The Lord hath forsaken me. God's abandoned me. My Lord hath forgotten me. That's what they're saying right now. But Isaiah says, But he will show that he hath not. He hasn't forgotten you. Can a woman forget her sucking child? Can a woman forget the child that she's breastfeeding? No. That she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Of course not. He says, but even a woman might forget somehow, in some crazy way, the kid that they're breastfeeding. But I'm not going to forget you, house of Israel. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Now there's this image of gravening the people on the palms of your hands so that you don't forget them. And that's very valid. But there's another, for us as Christians, the imagery here is beautiful. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. That's exactly what Christ does when he's crucified. Thy walls are continually before me. Now, what is that? Walls. That's a little bit strange. But from a Christological standpoint, actually, it makes some sense. When you think about where Jesus was crucified, he was crucified outside the walls of Jerusalem. So from a Christological reading, this actually makes all kinds of sense. He's graven him upon the palms of his hands through the crucifixion, and he was outside the walls of the city. The walls of the city are sort of in front of him. But this can also mean he's graven them upon the palms of his hands. He's literally put the names of the people, carved them into his own hands. And so their walls, or their city, is continuously before his face. So you think you've abandoned? They think that God has abandoned Jerusalem? No, I'm here still, he says. I'm still here in Jerusalem. The walls of Jerusalem are continually before me. I haven't left Jerusalem. I'm right here still in the temple. And that's a beautiful image. They're saying, you've left us, you've forgotten us. He said, no. I'm here. I've always been here. Because thy children shall make haste against thy destroyers, and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. And this is an interesting idea, that their children will make haste against their destroyers, and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. That is a very strange and interesting image. But the idea here is that the Assyrians are so weak that even your kids could go out and fight them. And they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. Those that have laid such destruction could be just blown away even by your kids, right? I think that's the idea here, of this eschatological idea that the Assyrians are going to become so weak that even your kids could go and fight them. It says, lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together, and they shall come to thee. As I live, saith the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all as with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride. He says, look up, lift up your eyes round about, and look at all of these things. All these gather themselves together, and they shall come to thee. All these people are gathering together to come to you, these people that have been scattered. And as I live, saith the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, as with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride. What is this? There's imagery here of a bride taking these special ornaments that they would have for their wedding and tying them on, presumably around their heads. Because we do have some ethnographic evidence and other historical evidence of people, women, binding these ornaments on when they're getting married. Sometimes in places people are even tying on their dowry in the form of coins with holes in them. But the idea is they're being clothed like an ornament and binding them on like a bride preparing for the wedding, that these people are going to sort of come back and ornament Israel and Judah, specifically Judah. For thy wastes and thy desolate places and the land of thy destruction shall even be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallow thee up shall be far away. So many people will come back that the place will be crowded, and all their enemies are going to be far away. The children whom thou shalt have after thou hast lost the first shall again in thine ears say, the place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. The first there is not original to the manuscript in the Book of Mormon. That is an explanatory note. It is actually, after thou hast lost the other. Now, what is the other? Presumably, it is the first children. So that's not really that much of an issue, but that is a small change. But once again, like I said, it's not really an issue. After you have lost the first, shall again in thine ears say, the place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. So there's going to be so many people, so many that have moved in, that have come back, or that have been that are actual children that have grown up there because the enemies are far away, that they'll say, wow, this is too crowded. I need a place for me to live. So there's this total desolation right now. But he says someday you're going to have so many new people there, people coming back, and children, that it's going to feel crowded. That place, the place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell, is also a nod to something that happens back in Judges. Then you have people that have been assigned a place to live, but it's too small for them, so they have to go move somewhere else. And that's the image here. Then shalt thou say in thine heart, who hath begotten me these, seeing I have lost my children, and am desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro? And who hath brought these up? Behold, I was left alone. These where have they been? And you'll say in your heart, where did these come from? I had lost all my children, and now suddenly the whole place is full. I was desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro. I was exiled, being sent wherever my captors wanted to send me. Where did these come from? I was alone. Where have these been? Suddenly I am surrounded by children, in other words. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people. They shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. They say, well, where did all these people come from? And then God gives the answer, the Gentiles. I'll set up my standard and call the Gentiles all together, like somebody setting up a flag in battle, a rallying flag for people to flock to. And he says, they'll bring their sons, your sons, in their arms, and your daughters will be carried upon their shoulders. The Gentiles are the ones that will bring these people back. Kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face toward the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. He's seeing this eschatological time in which the Gentiles are bringing everybody back. What's interesting is that this will, of course, eventually happen. Cyrus of Persia, you can say, indirectly fulfills this prophecy, because he comes in and says, okay, everybody, some of you guys can go home if you want. Most people stay, but you can say that that's being fulfilled in that sense. But there's lots of different ways in which you can see this as being fulfilled, and there may be future fulfillment of this too. But there's this idea of kings coming back, and Gentiles coming back and bringing these people back. Kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their faces towards the earth. That someday, and this is more eschatological. We haven't really seen this happen necessarily yet, but kings acknowledging that Jehovah is the Lord. Although I guess that has happened. We have had traditionally quite a few Christian kings in world history, so you can see that as being fulfilled in that sense by these Christian kings coming back. But Isaiah is speaking in this sort of eschatological sense here. For shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captives delivered? Now, what does that mean, lawful captives? You could say the captives of a tyrant, something like that, maybe. That's maybe a reasonable translation. So he says, will the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captives delivered? Are these people really going to be delivered? It seems like it'll be a little bit too good to be true. But he says, no, thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. He says, no. This seems too crazy right now, but it is going to happen. I'm going to fight with those that have fought with you, and I'm going to save your children. I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh, and they shall be drunken with their own blood as with sweet wine. This is the destruction that's going to fall upon the people. They feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh. This is what happens in a siege. They'll be drunken with their own blood as with sweet wine. This, presumably a civil war of sorts. On all flesh shall know that I, the Lord, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Everyone is going to know that the Lord is saving them, and he is the mighty one. And that's the image that we're concluding with here, that he closes this out with. And that's kind of a disturbing image. He's saying, listen, I'm going to beat up on the Assyrians. They're going to have some major problems, which they do. We know that the Babylonians do eventually come in and beat these guys up. And everyone's going to know that Jehovah is the Lord. And this chapter is really a beautiful chapter. This beautiful image of, okay, Hezekiah, get things ready because I'm bringing everybody back. And there's going to be so many people you're not even going to know where they came from. And eventually the Gentiles are going to bring these people back. And to me, that's a beautiful image. That's a beautiful image. And we've seen this fulfilled in various small ways. We're going to continue to see it fulfilled in small ways. But this is one of these times where Isaiah is looking far into the future. And even though he's talking to people in his own time during the Assyrian period, his eye is towards the future, thinking about things that are going to happen later. And a very sort of eschatological chapter of saying, listen, guys, this isn't always going to be like this. Things are going to be okay someday. And so you can see why the Nephites have latched onto this. Because it's so hopeless for them during the Babylonian time. They're applying this thing from the Assyrian period to the Babylonian period. And it seems so hopeless. But God's saying, you know what, it's not hopeless. Things are going to be okay. And things are going to work out in a miraculous way. And for us, when some things seem hopeless sometimes, it's important to remember it doesn't get much more hopeless than this. By saying God's going to take care of you anyway. And I think for us, remembering that is hugely important. So that's Isaiah 49. We're going to be getting Isaiah 50, so we're going to be jumping to another part of the Book of Mormon. And we're going to sift through some of this stuff here. But it should be pretty good. And we'll just keep on keeping on with this. But this has been an interesting chapter. And we'll get some more. Like I said, we're in the Book of Mormon all the way up through 55. So that's helpful. The Book of Mormon here was pretty helpful. And will continue to be so. But that's it for today. And we'll see you guys next time.